Jayo Braja Janaranjanam Jayo Yasodanandanam Jayo Braja Janaranjanam Jayo Braja Janaranjanam Jayo Jamunatira Vanachari Jayo Kunja Bihari Jayo Jamunatira Vanachari Jayo Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Shri Radhe Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai 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 Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna. So, wir lesen heute aus dem Caitanya-caritāmṛta, Madhya-līlā, Kapitel 20, Vers 175. Vaibhavam Prakasham Yaiche Devaki Tanujam Dvibhujam Swarupam Kabu Kabhu Hayam Chaturbhujam. Schauen wir, wie wir das jetzt hinkriegen. Vaibhava Prakasha Jaiche Devaki Tanujam Dvibhuja Swarupa Kabhu Kabhu Haya Chaturbhujam Vaibhava Prakasha Jaiche Devaki Tanujam Dvibhuja Swarupa Kabhu Kabhu Haya Chaturbhujam. Das ist ein bisschen schwer, weil das ist, also wenn es nur Bengali ist, ist es leichter. Wenn viele Sanskrit-Wörter sind, dann tendiert man das so wie Sanskrit-Verse auszusprechen, aber probiert es trotzdem. Vaibhava Prakasha Jaiche Devaki Tanujam Dvibhuja Kabha Chaturbhujam Vaibhava Prakasha Jaiche Devaki Tanujam Dvibhuja Swarupa Kabhu Kabhu Haya Chaturbhujam. Ladies. Vaibhava Prakasha Jaiche Devaki Tanujam Dvibhuja Swarupa Kabhu Kabhu Haya Chaturbhujam. Vielen Dank. Wort für Wort, word by word. We do English. I have the English book here. Everybody speaks English? To learn English. Okay, very good. Vaibhava Prakasha. The feature of Vaibhava Prakasha. Jaiche, just as. Devaki Tanujam, the son of Devaki. Dvibhuja. Was heißt das? Dvibhuja? Two arms, yes. Two-handed. Swarupam, form. Kabhu, sometimes. Kabhu, sometimes. Haya, is. Chaturbhuja, 400, yes. Very good. So translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. An example of Vaibhava Prakasha is the son of Devaki. He sometimes has 2 hands and sometimes 4 hands. Purport. When Lord Krishna took his birth, he appeared outside the womb as 4-handed Vishnu. Then Devaki and Vasudeva offered their prayers to him and asked him to assume his 2-handed form. The Lord immediately assumed his 2-handed form and ordered that he be transferred to Gokula on the other side of the river Yamuna. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sriyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostate Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Again the verse. Så du übersetzt für Sie, ja? Okay. So again the Sanskrit, Bengali Sanskrit. Vaibhava prakashayaiche devaki tanujva dibuja swarupa kabu kabu haya chaturbhuja. An example of Vaibhava Prakash is the son of Devaki. He sometimes has 2 hands and sometimes 4 hands. So this is a section of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructing Sanatana Goswami about the different very technical aspects of the manifestations of the Lord. And he's talking about Vaibhava, Vaibhava forms, and then Vaibhava Prakash are Vaibhava manifestations, and then before that there is the Prabhava and Vaibhava. These are the 2 main divisions that are made. And so the Vaibhava is Krishna directly. Here we hear that Krishna sometimes is Dvibhuja and sometimes is Chaturbhuja. And this is a very interesting topic because for many people in the Western world it's very confusing why Indian people depict divinities or entities with multiple arms, multiple heads, they are a little bit confused, when they see that. But for somebody who is, acquainted with the Vedic tradition and Devatas, it's a very common way to, depict different divinities. Different divinities have different amount of arms. Sadbhuja, Chaturbhuja, Ashtabhuja, Shaddasabhuja, There is a very amazing depiction, maybe you remember in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, there is this very sweet story where a small Nimai Pandit, or Nimai baby, not yet Pandit, is always disturbing the Brahmana who is cooking bhoga. So traditionally it was like that a Brahmana would only eat at the house of a Brahmana, and ideally even he would himself prepare the food. He would not even eat the food prepared by somebody else. So many Brahmins or renunciates, sannyasis, they would have a very strict regiment about how they consume food and where they eat. And if they didn't follow this properly, they would practically lose their position. So this Brahmana was traveling, and the father of Nimai invited him to cook. Please come to our house, please cook, so we can, please, you can use our kitchen, you can use everything you need, and please, honor our house by spending some time here and cooking. So the Brahmana agreed, started cooking, made some nice preparations, and then when he was ready, he was offering it to the Lord. And in the middle of the offering, when he was halfway through with the mantras, he heard some noises, he opened his eyes, and small Nimai is eating everything and laughing. So the Brahmana was like, my God, this child destroyed the offering. So the parents were very, very ashamed, and they excused themselves, and they cleaned everything again. So please cook one more time. Here again, new ingredients, So he started again to cook everything, And the parents were taking care of the child, making sure he doesn't run away. But by Yoga Maya's, energy, they all fall asleep. And he went again in the middle of the offering, again, was eating everything, in front of the Brahmana. So the Brahmana was really very, very angry already. I forgot it was 3 or 4 times, but at least 3 times. So then they locked Nimai in a different building, Everybody went to sleep. It was very late at night already. And the Brahmana finally was cooking one last time, and then when he was ready, was making the offering again, small Nimai is there, And but that time, because it was middle of the night, then Nimai manifested, a 16-arm formed, 16 arms with all the divine weapons. It's described very, very beautiful form of the Lord. And actually sometimes it's interesting in the Gopal deity, the first deity in Vrindavan, which is now worshipped as Srinathji in Gujarat, in Nathadwar. It's depicted very often like that, with 16 arms. So maybe that Gopal was that deity, that form of Krishna. So for us, if we grew up with Vedic tradition, or if we are acquainted with Vedic tradition, many arms is not very surprising. And of course also it's very practical. How often you have been in a situation where you needed 2 extra arms? Probably very often. I know many circumstances. I hear it regularly. You're like, oh my God, I need 2 extra arms. So yes, why not? Why not manifest extra arms? So for us, anatomically, we might be a little bit confused how it's possible, but many animals have many arms. Many animals have many eyes also. Nrsimhadev actually is similar like Shiva, is also 3-eyed. Nrsimhadev actually has 3 eyes. So the third eye is not always open, because when the third eye opens, that means he's very angry. So also the form of Shiva with third eye open is considered to be very angry. And actually in Vrindavan, between the Banki Bihari Bazaar and the Loi Bazaar, near the Sriji jewelers, there is a very beautiful deity of Lord Nrsimhadev with 3 eyes. It's like this, tall, and he has 2 big eyes like this, and 1 big eye like this, and he's sticking his tongue like this. It's a very, very nice form of Nrsimhadev with 3 eyes. So, of course, this might be very practical and very impressive. The more arms, the more impressive. Like this Brahmana was completely, he had no doubts anymore that the small Nimai was Bhagavan, Krishna himself, when he saw this, opulent manifestation. But in the Brahma Samhita, we of course hear that the Lord actually is not dependent or limited by his senses like we are. So we might be limited with 2 arms, 2 eyes, etc. But the limbs, the senses of the Lord are not limited like ours. So we hear this in the Brahma Samhita, Shakalendriya Vriti Mantina Pashyanti Panti. So the Lord has the ability to do anything with any function of the sense, of each sense can fulfill the function of all the other senses. So that's why the 200 form of Krishna, even at first sight, it might seem like a normal human. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita also, those who are not intelligent, or less charmingly, the asses, the donkeys, they think, they deride me when I appear in my human form, 200 form. They are confused. And not only the asses, even Brahma himself, Indra himself, they were both confused. And this is a very interesting. I heard that in the Madhva Sampradaya. So we technically are also part of the Madhva Sampradaya. We are Brahma, Narada, Madhva, Gaudiya Sampradaya, ISKCON. And but in the Madhva Sampradaya, where they really focus on Madhvacharya as the main acharya, for us, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the main personality in our Sampradaya. In the Madhva Sampradaya, they don't discuss the Brahma Vimohana Lila. It's Guru Aparat. You cannot discuss the Brahma Vimohana Lila because Brahma made a big mistake. And he was thinking, this small boy, he's eating with his left hand and right hand simultaneously, This is not God. I don't think so, Let me test. And then he stole, all the calves and all the all the cows and calves. He stole everything, trying to see how Krishna would react. And in Brahma's time scale, he was only gone for 1 second. He stole all the calves and cows, he put them away, and then he looked back to see what's going on. So in the meantime, a whole year had passed in Vrindavan, and nothing had changed. On the contrary, everything became better. Everybody was loving their children more. The cows were loving their calves even more. So he was completely disturbed and confused. How is this possible? So he looked back, and he had these calves and cows, calves and cowherd boys, hidden there. And so the double replicas, perfect replicas, were there in Vrindavan as well. So because Krishna, of course, was afraid, he's like, oh my God, how am I going to go back home? I lost everything. So, in one sense, he's a small boy who is, from the perspective of Vrindavan, he's a small boy who's just afraid to get chastised by his mother. He comes back home. You're coming alone? Where's everybody else? You lost all the calves, all the cowherd boys. So it's described out of fear, of Mother Yashoda, out of fear of the elders, Krishna quickly manifested, a second set, of everybody, perfect. And because it was Krishna himself, the mothers were much more attached to their children than usual, and the cows were much more attached to their calves than usual. And this Yoga Maya is so powerful that Balaram took some time. It took some time for Balaram to realize what was happening. So in the previous verse here we hear that Balaram is the first Vaibhava manifestation. Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai. Nrsimhadev, Balaram is the first Vaibhava manifestation, the first complete manifestation of Krishna. But still, even Balaram was confused for a short while. And sometimes that might be surprising, but it's not surprising because even Krishna himself is under the control of Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya has such a powerful agency, she's allowed to put Krishna in illusion. Krishna is really afraid of Mother Yashoda. Why should Krishna be afraid of Mother Yashoda? No, he's the all-powerful personality of Godhead. He could just easily, manifest his opulences in front of Mother Yashoda. But that's not the Leela in Vrindavan. Krishna is really, ultimately, the son of Yashoda. And he's really afraid. It's not that Krishna is pretending. And the proof for this, it says, when Krishna was running away after he, broke the butter pots and was feeding the monkeys, he ran away and he went into hiding. And while he was hiding, he was crying. So that's the proof that the acharyas say. So he's really afraid. It's not that he's hiding and he's like, okay, anyways, I'm God, what to do? Let's see if she's coming. Or I'm omniscient, close my eyes, I know exactly where she is. No. Krishna is really afraid and he's really hiding. His chest, is beating, breathing very fast. He's crying. His eyes, the kajal, the color on his eyes, is running down his cheeks. Because Yoga Maya has the agency, the authority over Krishna to put him in illusion. And only sometimes when required, Yoga Maya will allow or will enhance Krishna's pastimes. Krishna sometimes manifests his opulences, So then Mother Yashoda looks into his mouth, and he manifests the whole universe. And she sees, all the planets, planet Earth, and herself inside Krishna's mouth. Look at Krishna's mouth, So this is the original inception. Yes, Krishna in this two-armed form is not limited at all. So we might think that, because we ourselves, we are limited with 2 arms. So we would like to have more arms. And there's this very famous story in the Krishna book, in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, of this demon. What's his name? Baumasura? I think it was Baumasura. Baumasura? Huh? Banasura. Banasura, yeah. Banasura. Banasura, he was the son of Mother Earth, and he wanted to have more arms. He was not happy with 2 arms. So he prayed to Lord Shiva, and he got 1,000 arms. 1,000 arms. 500 right hands, 500 left hands. So he could pick up 500 bows, 500 arrows at the same time, and shoot 500 arrows at the same time. Wow. So that might seem like something very powerful. But in reality, Krishna, like I said before, is not limited like we are limited by our 200 forms. Krishna is actually the reservoir of all opulences and all powers. And when needed, he can manifest. Just like the small boy Nimai, small Nimai baby, he was crawling. He couldn't even walk properly, but he was able to manifest a form with 16 arms, if needed. Or technically, what is described here is actually Dwarka Krishna. So Vrindavan Krishna is always only 2 arms. And in Vrindavan, even Vrindavan is the most opulent place, the Aishvarya is completely covered by sweetness and madhurya. And this is even reflected in the way the residents of Vrindavan dress themselves and decorate themselves. So technically the residents of Vrindavan have the most valuable jewels and ornaments, but they cover them with flowers. So this represents the mood of Vrindavan. Even Vrindavan is the most opulent place and the supreme abode. Aishvarya, or opulence, wealth, power is not the predominant mood or most important asset. So the residents of Vrindavan, they go to the forest and they cover their ornaments with flowers. Looks nicer. They prefer flowers over metal ornaments. So Krishna in Vrindavan is always Krishna, always 2-handed, and he doesn't require any additional hands to accomplish anything. But it says as soon as Krishna leaves Vrindavan, leaves Braj Dham, Krishna becomes Vasudeva. So externally, on first sight, it might seem like it's the same Krishna, but in reality it's Vasudeva. And in different occasions, then this Vasudeva will manifest his 400 forms. So if you read the Krishna book, you will hear that sometimes, for example, it's Krishna 200 in Dwarka, but then sometimes he has to deal with some demons, and then he calls Garuda. And then Garuda comes and he manifests his 400 form, his chakra, Sudarshana, and he's fully manifested by Aishvarya. So in Dwarka, it's like it's described in this verse. Sometimes 2 hands, sometimes 4 hands. In Vrindavan, always 2 hands. And sometimes for the purpose of Lila, Krishna manifests, not himself, but he manifests, a different form of Vishnu. And everybody's confused, And the gopis ask, have you seen Krishna? And he's like, have you seen Krishna? Not interested at all in Narayan. And then Krishna can't hold this form anymore and manifests again his 200 form. So for Leela, sometimes he might manifest. But technically in Vrindavan he's always two-handed. And outside of Vrindavan he is potentially always Chakradhari. So Chakradhari means the holder of the chakra, Sudarshana, the most powerful weapon. And this is, you could say, the main designation of Vasudeva, Vishnu or Aishvarya, that he has this most powerful weapon at his hands, Sudarshana. Okay, so if there's no questions about this topic, we can continue a little bit more talking about Akshaya Tritiya, but maybe there are some questions about this or comments, something you would like to add. No? Yes.
So actually a small comment.
Yes.
So whenever I usually when I talk to people about ISKCON and so on, so they usually say Krishna is 200 form. Krishna is like derived from, or not derived, but he comes from Vishnu. They don't know that it is Kshirodaka Sai Vishnu, but they say it is one of the incarnations of Vishnu. So well, I know the answer, but I just, if you can, I'm not asking this as a question, but so that you can more elaborate about the 28th Dwapara Yuga and this part of the Krishna in his original Vrindavan Krishna form. If you can comment on that and compare it to Kshirodaka Sai Vishnu.
Yes. So actually there is a Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was conducting these discussions in South India, in Srirangam. So basically it's more or less a the main philosophical difference between the Sri Vaishnavas and Gaudiya Vaishnavas, you could say. Madhvas have a slightly different idea as well, but mainly the Sri Vaishnavas, emphasize very strongly that Krishna is one of the incarnations of Vishnu and Narayan. So Narayan is supreme, and Krishna is a very sweet manifestation of Narayan. And for us, it's the way around. So we consider, and this is basically, if you read the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, that's where Krishna Das Kaviraj is establishing exactly that. By Shastra and by the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how Krishna, Balaram, Panchatattva, how they are the origin and how this is the source of all other manifestations. So there's a few different ways you can describe this topic or argue about this topic. Krishna appears in the sequence of the 10 avatars. So there's a Dashavatar, and he appears in that sequence. So there's Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Nrsimha, Vamana, Parashuram, Ram, Balaram, Krishna, Buddha maybe also, and then Kalki avatar. So this Dashavatar, in that sequence of the Dashavatars, Krishna appears, and that's, you could say, the main perception. So Krishna is one of the 10 avatars, and these 10 avatars, come from Narayan. But like you mentioned, the way we understand it from the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Caitanya-caritāmṛta is that through the agency of Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, all the avatars are manifested in this world. But this is all, in the Bhagavatam it's described, auf Deutsch is weltzugewandte Formen Krishnas. I don't know the English one actually, but the form of Mahavishnu, Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, and Antaryami, they are the forms that are responsible for the material creation. So the avatars and the different manifestations, guna avatars, lila avatars, all of these are manifestations within the material reality, and they all appear through the agency of Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. But we understand from the Brahma Samhita also that there is a whole hierarchy within the spiritual world. Also in the Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami is hinting towards that. you know, how there's a hierarchy, you know, of different levels in the spiritual world. So basically, our understanding is that Vaikuntha is the first personal realm in the spiritual reality beyond the what is it called? Viraja river, you know, the river of, you know, emptiness, and then the Brahma Jyoti, and within the Brahma Jyoti there is the Vaikuntha planets. But the Vaikuntha planets, Krishna is worshipped in awe and reverence. You know? So the idea, the main, you could say, argument, you could say it's philosophical, but it's mainly actually rasa, is that the more private, the more intimate, the more superior. Mm-hmm. So the relationship in Vaikuntha is very much in a lot of awe and reverence. So there's one Vaikuntha planet, you know, and within one Vaikuntha planet there's one form of Narayan, you know. So there's Janardana Vaikuntha, Govinda Vaikuntha, Srinivasa Vaikuntha. So for each, you know, Vaikuntha form of Narayan, there's one Vaikuntha planet, you know, within the Brahma Jyoti sky. And so basically he's the king of one Vaikuntha planet, you know. And all the living entities, you know, all the devotees, they are, you know, worshipping the Lord and singing praise. And, you know, there is, Prabhupada says, we hear in the third canto, there are also airports, you know. So you travel by, you know, plane, Vaikuntha Vimanas, you know, within these Vaikuntha planets, and you go to take darshan of Vishnu, you know, on the other side of the planet, maybe. So it's one Vaikuntha Ishvara for one planet. Higher than Vaikuntha, according to our understanding, is Ayodhya. You know, so in Ayodhya Dham, Ram is the king of one city. You know? So it's one city, you know, and he is the king, you know, with Sita Devi and his brothers as ministers. You know, so it's much more intimate. You know, it's not the whole planet, one deity, but it's one city, you know, Ayodhya, and the whole city is, you know, just revolving around Lord Ram. Mm-hmm. But of course, he is the king, and as a king, there is some distance. You know? There is some, you know, awe and respect, some protocol and respect you need to offer to the king. You know? So even he's the, you know, a very beloved king, and he's like a caring father. Still, there is some distance. You know? In Dwarka, Krishna is not the king, you know? So he doesn't have the responsibility and burden of a king. So if you study the Ramayana, you will understand, you know, what the burden of kingship actually is. You know, Raja Dharma is one of the most difficult dharmas to follow. You know, you need to be very selfless. You know, Prabhupada, I was studying a little bit about Prabhupada and positions and salaries, and Prabhupada very strongly emphasizes, you know, that anybody who's in a position of power should actually strongly cultivate vairagya, you know, detachment and renunciation, you know. Otherwise, the tendency will be to enjoy the position, power, you know, the amenities that might be offered, and then everything can be spoiled. So, a true king, even he has so much power, you know, is actually detached, you know. Or you could also say, in general terms, people talk about, how is it called in English? You know, a truly powerful person is somebody who is actually very dangerous, but chooses to be kind, you know. So that's a real kshatriya, you know, you could say. So he's really dangerous, you know. I mean, Arjuna, you know, Bhima, they're like, when they, you know, were let loose in the battlefield, like monsters, you know, super powerful, you know, killers. You know, you know, Bhima could, you know, make a ladu out of 10 elephants, 10 chariots, and hundreds of soldiers, you know. Big ladu, you know. Squeeze them and throw them around, you know. Imagine, you know. He's more powerful than 10,000 elephants, you know. But, you know, most of the time, Bhima was very sweet, you know. You know, he was collecting flowers for Draupadi, you know, or was, you know, worshipping Krishna, you know, was a great devotee, you know. So, yeah, true kshatriya is, very dangerous, but actually chooses to be kind, or is kind by nature. So Lord Ram, is very much bound, by the duties of a king, and is very, very serious, very serious, very, very grave, very calm, very thoughtful, Krishna is in many ways the opposite, Krishna is very colorful, very jolly, joking, deceitful, tricky, So he's the most prominent resident of Dwarka, So he's the most popular person in town, but he's not the king. So basically he's the most popular, but has no real responsibility, you could say. So that is Krishna. It's much more intimate. And also Krishna manifests in Dwarka his opulence. He's married to 16,000 wives. Whereas Ram is only married to one, Caitanya-caritāmṛta, only to Sita. And when Sita goes to the forest, Ram is in separation. What's going on? Okay. No problem. You can hear in the kitchen. You can also hear it. Hare Krishna. So so in Dwarka, Krishna manifests, his opulence and Lila. He's Lila Purushottama, whereas Ram is Maryadama Purushottama. He's trying to be, or is being, an ideal example, of sacrifice. Krishna is not sacrificing. Krishna is enjoying, to the fullest. But of course, Dwarka still, Krishna is very warrior-like. He's fighting, and it says that the residents of Dwarka, they understand that he is the super soul. So they have some veneration for him, some respect. Sweeter than Dwarka is Mathura. So in Mathura, the sweetness of Vrindavan is already, you could say, visible, palpable. Krishna is younger, and Krishna is he's a very young boy. He's not yet, the commander in chief and the most famous and powerful warrior, protector of the city. In Mathura, he's a young boy who just came from Vrindavan. So the mood is much more local and sweet. And then in Vrindavan, Krishna is just in a village. So that's the main idea that we have, that we understand that Krishna is supreme because that's where he originates. He originates in his village. And that's where Krishna is having the most personal relationships. And or like in another way that sometimes is put, Krishna is not God. Krishna is Krishna, and with a small part of his, potency, he's God as well. So you could say, being God is the sidekick of Krishna. Krishna's main occupation is not to be God, whereas Vishnu Narayan is God. That's his main occupation, is to be God, to be venerated as God and seen as God and respected as God and worshipped as God, etc. Whereas Krishna is not at all. This is completely absent in Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, nobody knows that he is God. And that's the supreme position. So Krishna is Krishna. Krishna is not God. Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, with a small part of my energies, I sustain the entire material creation. So sometimes that's our definition of God. God is the creator, the maintainer, but that's not the main occupation of Krishna. Krishna is doing that with a small portion of his energy. Okay, so then we'll talk a little bit about Akshaya Tritiya. So Akshaya Tritiya, who knows what the word Akshaya means? Akshaya. There's a famous pot called Akshaya Patra from the Mahabharata. Somebody knows? Draupadi had an Akshaya Patra. Draupadi had a pot which was called Akshaya-patra. So what does Akshaya mean? Yeah, unerschöpflich. And I had a good word in English somewhere here. Let me see if I find it. Yeah, inexhaustible. There's another word here, but I don't see it straight away. So Akshaya means inexhaustible. So this occurs always during this time before Nrsimha Chaturdasi. We have Akshaya Tritiya. So Tritiya means the third day. So we are on the third day, in the Vedic calendar. Akshaya Tritiya. And this day is a very special day in many instances. But since we started talking about the Akshaya-patra, we will start with that story. So the story is that the Pandavas, they were exiled. They were very wealthy. They had constructed a new capital, Indraprastha. And then in the game of dice, in gambling, they lost everything. They lost everything. So they had to go to the forests, and live in exile under very difficult conditions. They were royal, maybe the most wealthy royal family, of the time, probably, certainly. And suddenly they were living in the forest, and had to sustain on roots and berries, so it was not very nice. Not very nice, and especially Bhima was suffering a lot. Bhima was always very agitated, and he was telling Yudhishthira, we should just go back, and by force take what is ours. But Yudhishthira actually was very Brahminical and saintly, and he didn't want to, first of all break, the burden they had, the promise, or they were bound by, by losing that match of dice, to stay in the forest. But actually also we know that Yudhishthira actually enjoyed being in the forest more than being in the palace. So this is considered to be a real king. A Raja Rishi is a king who has Brahminical saintly qualities. So actually he was very happy, Wow, no politics, I can talk to all the brahmanas, I can meet a different brahmana every day, and inquire from them and spend time with the brahmanas. So Yudhishthira was really liking it. Bhima was suffering the most, He and Draupadi, they were always like, let's go back to, and just kick their asses. Show them who's really powerful, And Arjuna, of course, he spent actually most of the time of an exile in the heavenly planets. He actually was able to ascend to the heavenly planets and visit Indradeva, his father. And the twins, they were just serving. But in any case, all of them were living in the forest and were described there. They became more and more emaciated, like yogis, became very thin. And so Yudhishthira started to make sure, they're well taken care of. He prayed to Surya Dev, Surya Bhagavan, Surya Narayan. And Surya Dev gave this Akshaya-patra, this mystical pot to Draupadi. And Draupadi could prepare any meal in that pot, and as long as she hadn't eaten, the pot will continue to provide food. So, Akshaya-patra. So, and that was very important because usually Kunti Devi, we hear in the Mahabharata, she used to cook two pots, two big pots, one for the family and one for Bhima. So, especially Bhima, was very hungry. He's known as Vrikrodar, voracious eater. And so this Akshaya-patra solved that problem, Draupadi would cook something, and as long as she hadn't eaten, he could give Bhima and all the others as much as they wanted. So, but it occurred that Duryodhana, he was always trying to harm the Pandavas, and put them in a bad light, and somehow it was not enough that he had sent them to the forest. He was always trying to annoy them even more. He tried different things. Sometimes he was camping nearby, with big party and feast, and it's another story. But this time he thought, I have a very good idea. So he knew, he had some spies in the forest, so he knew what time Draupadi would eat. So he received Durvasa Muni in his palace, and Durvasa Muni is known to be an incarnation or partial incarnation of Shiva. So he has this nature to be Ashutosh. Ashutosh means very easily angered, very easily pleased. So you have to be very careful. Some guests are like that. You have to be very careful what you say, how you if they're not properly accommodated or they don't get the right attention, they become very angry. So we hear about Durvasa Muni also in the Srimad Bhagavatam when he offends Ambarish Maharaj. Very famous story. There also he became, unfittingly angry, at Ambarish Maharaj for breaking his fast. And he did it on purpose, basically. He on purpose, took a long time to disturb the fast of Ambarish Maharaj. And then, of course, we heard another story. Sudarshana, came to the help and chased Durvasa Muni through the whole universe. But Durvasa Muni is very powerful. He almost annihilated, Ambarish Maharaj. So Durvasa Muni visited Hastinapur in the Prastha, where Duryodhana was. And he said, anything I could, because he took really well care of him and his 10,000 disciples. So at the end of his stay, Duryodhana was like, I managed, and Durvasa Muni said, any boon you would like to have? And he was like, no, the only thing I want, please visit my brothers as well. Give them also the blessing of, having your darshan. Go to the forest, at this time, this is the perfect time. You go there and they will take care of you. Please bless my cousin brothers as well in the forest, the 5 Pandavas, But of course, the time Duryodhana told was right after Draupadi had eaten. That was his plan, So Durvasa Muni comes with 10,000 disciples, 10,000 disciples, and Draupadi had just eaten. That means the pot, will not provide any more food. If they would have come a few minutes earlier, she could have served 10,000 people without problem. But they came just after she had eaten. So they were in big trouble. So Yudhishthira Maharaj said, please, take a bath, and when you come back, we'll take care of you. So they went to take bath and to make them, fresh before taking a meal. So they were in a big, how do we cook now for 10,000 people? And if you don't cook, for sure he will become angry. Everybody, the reputation of Durvasa Muni was then already well known. There's many stories with Durvasa Muni. So they were very afraid. And then Krishna came. So Krishna came and realized their dilemma. And he said, okay, give me something to eat. And Draupadi is like, we have nothing. That's our whole problem. We have nothing. We cannot give them anything. There must be something. So Draupadi looked into the pot, and there was a small last morsel of food. Small. So she gave that little bit to Krishna. And then as soon as Krishna ate, because Krishna is the source of everything, all the 10,000 brahmanas suddenly felt really, really full. They were taking bath and they're like, oh my God, I cannot eat anything. I'm so full, So they actually became scared as well. They're like, oh my God, if we go back now and Yudhishthira has prepared this huge feast and we cannot eat anything, I think we should better go, So they quickly left. So this story shows how, the Akshaya Patra is very powerful, but the original Akshaya Patra is of course Krishna. Krishna surpasses even the Akshaya Patra, and a small morsel, small little, offering we make to Krishna pleases him so much, that everybody else is taken care for. Like the analogy Prabhupada always quotes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, how by just giving water to the roots or food to the stomach, the entire body is taken care of, or the entire tree is taken care for. And excuse me, sorry. So if the child is not able to stay quiet, you will have to go outside. I'm really sorry. So it's only 15 minutes more, then there will be breakfast. So any small amount of attention we give to Krishna makes a huge difference. We should not underestimate this. So also on this very day of Akshaya Tritiya, there's another very famous story that occurred, and that's the story of Sudama Brahmana. So Sudama Brahmana is a childhood friend of Krishna. They spent together time in the Gurukul, and they had many adventures. And one very famous adventure was when they went collecting wood for their guru, and then suddenly a big storm came. So they couldn't return home, and they were hiding in the cave of a tree together, Krishna and Sudama Brahmana, in Gurukul. So they were very, very good friends, and of course the Kshatriyas, go back to their opulent life, and the Brahmanas go back to their simple life. So it happens that Sudama Brahmana was married, and was a very, very poor Brahmana. That's a whole other story, why Brahmanas are poor generally. But it's actually a blessing in disguise, or a curse, which is a blessing in disguise. So Sudama Brahmana was very, very poor, extremely poor. And his wife, she was, of course, pragmatic like any housewife, and she's like, you have such a wealthy friend, he could just give you something, Why don't you just go to Krishna and, ask him to help you, We have nothing, we're literally like starving and, having very, very little food, So, but Sudama Brahmana was a pure devotee, so he didn't want to ask anything from Krishna, So he was really not in the mood. But on the other side, he's like, yeah, it's a good idea. I would really like to see Krishna again, meet my friend again. So he was a little bit, you could say, how you call it in English? His emotions, apprehensive, or like his emotions were splitted. He really wanted to meet Krishna, but he didn't want to go there to just ask something from him. Ambivalent, yes. He was ambivalent, in his emotions. But his wife was very, adamant, so he finally went, But he didn't want to go empty-handed, so he collected some broken rice, the cheapest rice you can get, He collected that rice, and he went and managed to somehow, meet Krishna finally, with some difficulties, because the guards, were not so sure if they want to let pass such a, poor, wretched Brahmana. But when finally Krishna saw him, he was so happy, and he embraced him, and he sat him on his bed, and he was washing his feet, There's a very beautiful picture from the BBT that, shows this this situation where Krishna is washing the feet of Sudama Brahmana, and he's, crying in emotion. And then he said, I'm sure you have brought something for me. And Sudama Brahmana was like, nah, not really, because he was ashamed, the only thing he had was some broken rice, you have so much wealth here, what I have nothing to give you. No, I'm sure you have something, And Krishna actually was searching him, and there it is. I knew you had something for me. And then he's like, oh, this amazing broken rice. And he started eating the broken rice. And it's described, the Acharyas described that each morsel that he was taking, Rukmini or Lakshmi Devi, they were like, they knew with each morsel that he's taking, they have to reward him many, many, many fold. But Sudama Brahmana was completely just focused in the exchange with Krishna, and he left home, and he left the palace on his way back home, and then he realized, oh my God, I forgot to ask for something. Mission not accomplished, The wife had sent him to ask for some support, but he had completely forgotten, But anyway, he was very happy he had met Krishna, so he went back home, and he didn't recognize his hut, Where's my hut, It's like Ramakana Maharaj was saying when he went back to his hometown after many, many years, He was traveling with the train in Holland, and he was getting more and more excited. Oh my God, my hometown. Somehow, he got excited. My hometown. And then, he went past through it really fast with the train, and the school was not there. Most of the people just gone, So he was like, this was really sobering, the material reality, It was only like minute, maybe less than a minute, choo, and the village was gone, and half the buildings were also gone, you know. So like that, you know, Sudama Brahmana was shocked. He's like, where's my house, you know? Because instead of the small hut, there was a huge palace, you know. And suddenly he sees his wife waving out of the palace, you know. So Krishna rewarded him, you know, or Lakshmi Devi, you know. For each grain that Krishna was eating, he was being rewarded many fold. You know? And of course, this is the position of a devotee. Actually, a devotee is always safe and secure. Even externally, it might look that he's in a poverty-stricken position or materially disadvantaged. In reality, a devotee has the highest wealth. You know? And of course, another story like that is the story, and this happened on the Akshaya-tritiya day as well. So, but another similar story of Krishna bringing some grains to pay for fruits. You know the story. There's this vendor, and Krishna is seeing how everybody, you know, is buying fruits from this vendor. You know, this lady vendor, and he is thinking, I also want to, you know, purchase. I also want to do some bargaining and selling. You know, so he collects some rice. You know, but his hands are so small that everything is falling off his hands. And by the time he reaches to the vendor, there's almost anything left. You know, maybe a few grains of rice. You know, but the vendor is so, you know, amused and, you know, it's like man verzaubert, enchanted, you know, by the beauty of Krishna and his, you know, sweet gesture, you know, to want to also buy some fruits, that she just takes his few grains and just loads him with as many fruits as Krishna can carry, you know. And then, you know, she turns around and she sees that all her basket of fruits, you know, is turned into jewels, you know. So this is Krishna, you know. So also during this day, it's considered that this is the day when Parashuram was born, and some Vaishnavas worship actually Parashuram Jayanti, the appearance day of Parashuram today. We usually don't celebrate this so big in ISKCON. And also on this day, it is said this is the day when Vyasadeva started dictating the Vedas and the Mahabharata to Ganesh. So it's a very interesting story. You know, the Vyasadeva is the compiler of the Vedas, but actually he was just dictating them, and the scribe, you know, who was writing them down is Ganesh, you know? Ganapati, and the son of Shiva. And that's why you will see that Ganesha, in most depictions, he has one tooth missing, you know, and he's holding it in his hand, you know, because he used his tooth, you know, to inscribe all the Vedas and Mahabharata. You know. So traditionally, palm leaf texts were scratched into the palm leaves, you know, and then that was filled with ink afterwards. You know. So it's long lasting. It's like carved, basically carved into palm leaves. You know, and still there's quite a few texts you can find that are conserved like that. So yes, according to the Mahabharata, on Akshaya-tritiya day, today, Vyasadeva started dictating the Mahabharata and the Vedas to Ganesha. And there's a very interesting story in this connection, because Vyasadeva was technically a human, you know, so he had human needs, you know, like eating and going to the toilet, taking showers, etc. Whereas Ganesha is a devata, you know, so he has not the same bodily needs like a human. So Ganesha was saying, yeah, I can help you. I'm happily to be your scribe, but I don't want to be bored while you are, you know, doing your bodily, taking shower, eating, whatever. So I want to write the whole time. So Vedavyas said, no problem. You can only write the verse down if you fully understood it. If you haven't understood it, you cannot write it down, you know. So whenever Vyasadeva had to go to the toilet, or, you know, he would speak a verse which was very difficult to understand, you know. So Ganesh was like, he was thinking and thinking. So then Vyasadeva had enough time, you know, to take care of, you know, his bodily needs. And therefore in the Mahabharata, at regular intervals, you know. It is in the middle of the story, you find this verse, which is like completely, you know, confusing and difficult to understand. Yeah? Like that. And also on Akshaya Tritiya, today is the day when the Ganges descended from the spiritual world, you know, and descended onto the head of Shiva, and then from the head of Shiva into this world, you know. So this is also Akshaya Tritiya. So traditionally on this day, it's a day to any beginning. Anything you start on this day is considered to become successful. So therefore many people marry on this day, you know. Or in India, you will see the markets are full of people. They're buying gold and silver and new pots, you know. So it's like a new beginning, you know. It's a day to renew everything and start anew. But the last thing we need to mention is, because we are here in New Simhachalam, Navajyarana Singha Kshetra, in the original Simhachalam in India, this is the only day where you can see the Murti of Varaha Nisingha, you know, in its original form. Because from this day onwards, they start putting chandana, you know, sandalwood, on the Murti. You know. So they put chandana on the Murti, and only next year, the day before Akshaya Tritiya, they take it all out, and only on this day you can have darshan. So there's hundreds of thousands of people now trying to get darshan today in Simhachalam, you know, of Nijarupa. And in most other temples in India, today starts this 21 days of Chandana Yatra. I mean, sandalwood paste, and devotees, you know, prepare huge amounts of sandalwood paste. Everybody can grind sandalwood paste, you know, with huge sandalwood pieces, and the deities are covered, you know, in sandalwood, because right now in India, the hot season is really beginning, you know. So we were there in South India, it was already like 42 degrees almost every day. But now it's going to get even hotter. So the deities are covered in Chandan. Chandan. It's called Chandan Yatra. And in ISKCON Vrindavan also, the deities are covered very, very nicely, you know. In some days, completely. There is no dress, no ornaments, just from head to toes, completely covered in Chandan with very beautiful ornaments, you know. And sometimes they even put dry fruits, you know, as ornaments on the Chandan in different temples in Vrindavan and India. So yes, it's a very special day, Akshaya Tritiya. If you have anything you want to start, today is a good day, you know, to start some, you know, vratas, you know, or austerities, or something you want to start. Today is the best day to start. Okay, maybe there's some other questions. Otherwise, we go take prasadam. Singari Bhagavan ki jai, Simhachalam Dham ki jai, Gaura Bhaktarinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.